Thanks for coming back tonight. I've got one more recycled lesson from camp tonight. It's nice. It's kind of a bummer for people who were there who always had to listen to these things a couple of times, but it's nice for me to have a couple weeks of get my feet underneath me because I've got some of this stuff left over. But I don't just do it because it's left over. I think it's useful for us, and I hope that it's been some kind of beneficial for you. I told you this already. On February 14th, I sent out an email to this year's counselors and to last year's counselors, and I guess not just last year's, but people who I have looked up to for a long time. And I said, if you have one piece of advice to give to a young person, what would it be? And with this group of people, I told them, it's not love the Lord your God with all your heart. I got that one covered, because that's what everybody would say. They give some different advice. This is the one thing. I said, if there's one thing you would say to young men, what would it be? If there's one thing that you would say to young women, what would it be? And they told me the list. And so that's what I did last Sunday morning and this Sunday morning, was go through. It's easy enough on those two because Jesus told us, this is the most important thing for you. This is the second most important thing for you. Love God with your entire being and love your neighbor as yourself. So we went through the week, and Proverbs 16 and verse 16 summarizes my hope. This is one of those things that I would like for us to start with. Proverbs 16 and verse 16 says, how much better to get wisdom than gold, to get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver. And think about that. Seriously, actually process, if that's what you would think about, hearing what God has said. If I pulled out a giant wad of cash and said, you can have this giant wad of money, the gold in the Bible, or you can have the wisdom that God has offered in His Word, His revelation from the Creator of the universe, I think we take it for granted sometimes what we have in this, that God has spoken to us His Word that is direction for our lives. And the idea is to hear what God has said and to know what He wants for us is better than any pile of gold or silver, this great value that we have. And so this is why. I guess I've been doing a lot of that lately, but I want to offer you the why. And tonight's lesson is pretty much 4 passages. I think we're going to read 5 passages, but there are 4 connected passages. And here's something useful for you if you want to do this in your Bible, to make your cross-references in all of these passages, to write them down, and then when you get home at your kitchen table tonight, go down next to each one of these and write the others so that you can have your own cross-reference set up. But Deuteronomy Chapter 6 is going to be the first one. Deuteronomy 6, we're going to start reading in verse 24. We did this last Sunday morning. We did the Shema in Deuteronomy Chapter 6. It starts with, I am the Lord your God is one, and love the Lord your God with all your heart. That's what we did in Deuteronomy Chapter 6, starting in verse 4. But if you jump down to verse 24, this is one of those things that I have to tell myself this on a pretty regular basis, and I want to keep saying it. And I want my kids to know it. Not just my kids, I want our kids to know it. Deuteronomy 6 and verse 24. The Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God. And then this is the part. This is why I'm here, and this is what's highlighted in my Bible. The Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always. Those are the key words. God has given us this. God gave us the commands and the statutes and the laws But he specifically says he gave us this for our good always. Keep reading. That he might preserve us alive as we are this day. And it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to do all this commandment before the Lord our God as he commanded us. There's another one, and then I'll have a comment about this. Deuteronomy chapter 10. Flip over to chapter 10 and verses 12 and 13. Deuteronomy 10 verses 12 and 13. And then so this is what you do. Next to Deuteronomy 6:24, you write your cross-reference Deuteronomy 10. Next to Deuteronomy 10, you write Deuteronomy 6:24 so that you have them in your Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 12. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and to keep the commandments and statutes of the Lord, which I am commanding you today. And then this is the part that you highlight. For your good. Those are the key words that I think you can appreciate this. The reason why I would say this to a room full of kids, this is not God loading up a bunch of senseless rules on our shoulders that's some sort of horrible burden for me to have to carry around. It's hard to do. I mean, that's true, right? You've lived a Christian life, and I always think about Romans Chapter 6 when I think about trying to live the Christian life. And I'm sorry, it's Romans 7, where Paul talks about himself and he says, the thing that I want to do, I do not do. I want to live the Christian life and I want to do the right thing, and then I don't. And I fall off the wagon and I don't do it. And then he says, and the thing that I do not want to do, I see the sin and I see the thing that's wrong and I commit. I need to stop doing that. I need to stay away from it. He says, the thing that I do not want to do, I do the thing that I don't want to do. And so it's hard. The moral of the story and what we're talking about right now is it's hard. And you go through the Bible like it's a hard book to read. It takes a long time to read the whole thing. It's hard to remember it all. And so it might be tempting to think about this as just some heavy burden that we carry around on our shoulders in our lives. And maybe you look at your friends in the world and you say, everybody else gets to do this thing and it's fun and I can't do what everybody else is doing. And the thing that I want to just blast into my own heart over and over and over again is, this is not some heavy weight for me to carry around. God has given this to me ultimately for my good. Those are those two passages. I'm the one that benefits from this. And so, yes, it does seem difficult and a struggle sometimes, but ultimately it's for me. Turn over to Hebrews chapter 12. I told you there were 4 passages tonight. This is not one of them. But Hebrews chapter 12 paints a picture, I think, of what this means for us and how we need to consider the words that God has given us. And not only the words, as we go through this passage, Hebrews chapter 12, starting in verse 5, not only the words of this passage, but also our own life experiences. Like, I saw this thing, I think it was Clay that sent it to me last week. It said, my plans. And it starts with me here, a little stick figure, and there's a straight line, and then there's a flag, and it says, my plans. And then on the bottom it says, God's plans for me. And it's like, here I am, and here's a pit with an alligator in the bottom, and here's a really tall mountain that I have to climb, and you go over here, and here's a body of water that I have to cross somewhere, and then I go up a hill again, and there's the flag, my plan. God's plan for me is very different from my plan for me, and it seems like God's plan is a lot harder. Well, this is where you would reference Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 5. Have you not forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? That's what the Hebrew writer says. Hey, Ryan, Ryan, I need you to remember when God deals with you, when God talks with you, he's dealing with you as a child. And that doesn't mean in an insulting sort of a way. Oh, I got to deal with him as a child. It's, I love him, and I want what's best for him, and I'm going to deal with him as I would deal with one of my children. God addresses us as sons. And so this is what he says in Proverbs 3 and verse 11. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? And that's worth stopping and thinking about for just a second. Because we've all seen those kids, haven't we? We've seen the kid who has a parent who doesn't discipline them. And maybe the parent says, oh, I love my kid so much, I'm not going to discipline. And we see the kid and what that means for that kid's life, and we think, no, that's not love. You're not giving them structure. You're not giving them direction. You're not giving them any tools that they need for life. And so the rhetorical question here for us is, okay, children of God, what child is there, at least a child loved by his parent, what child is there who the father does not discipline? Verse 8, if you're left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them, but he, this is God, disciplines us for our good. There it is again. It's like the parent who says to the kid, hey, whenever I'm cooking dinner and the hot stove is on and you got a toddler walking around, you can't just come toddling into the kitchen and reach up on the stove. And to the kid, that might seem like a heavy burden and lots of unreasonable rules, but as the parent you say, there's a reason for this. And the reason is ultimately for your good, so you don't wind up with these horrible burns on your hand. And this passage walks us through, that's what God is to us. It's not some horrible burden that we have to carry around. It's God laying out his will for us, ultimately for our good. That's what it says in verse 10, that we may share in his holiness. Verse 11, at the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. And so, I say this, this is really just a selfish moment. It's one more opportunity for me to say this where my kids can hear it. And it's not just for my kids, though. It's for myself included. When I say things to my kids like, hey, put your phone down. You can't live your life like this, constantly doing. It's not because I'm just a cantankerous fogey who wants to make your life miserable. Those things might be true, but that's not the reason for the phone thing. It's ultimately for your good. That's the reason why we have the Bible, and that's the thing that that's the one thing that I want us to see in this lesson. God has spoken to us his word, and even though it may seem like a heavy burden sometimes, it's for our good. Turn over to Exodus chapter 20. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12, these are the 10 commandments. I said there were 4 passages tonight. The first is Deuteronomy 6. The second is Deuteronomy 10. The third is Exodus chapter 20 and the 10 commandments. And this commandment is the one that's honor your father and mother. And the reason why we're here at honor your father and mother is because listen to what God said about it. Exodus 20 and verse 12, honor your father and your mother. Here it is. that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Honor your father and mother. And I think most of us can appreciate this, because these are the people who love you more than anyone else in the world, who want the most for you and the best for you more than anybody else in the world. And so here are the people who are going to strive their very best, sacrifice themselves all the way to the end of the road so that you can succeed. And in spiritual terms, so that you can succeed spiritually and be right with God. And the idea is, honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land, for your benefit. It's ultimately for your good. And then Ephesians Chapter 6, this is our fourth passage. Ephesians Chapter 6 in verses 1 through 3, it's a reference to this commandment to honor your father and mother, but he says it again. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. The promise is, if you do this thing, then you will live long in the land. And so he references that. Honor your father and mother, verse 3, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. And so, that really is the end of my passages, my Bible lessons. But this is some of the stuff that I was thinking about at the end of camp. And some of the stuff that I think about now, I don't know why I'm like this, but I get very reflective in times like these. We've come to the end of camp. It's probably just a lot of an emotional dump. Like we've just spent all this time and now it's over and it's like, I don't even know. Like I've got to have some time to recalibrate. And that's probably a lot of what's going on. But, you know, there's a saying that I heard a while ago that I love. I'm going to make it a part of my vocabulary. You prepare your child for the path, not the path for your child. But I hate sending our kids away to college. Especially the ones that, you know, they feel like my own kids and they've been here, and I guess I've known Ava for longer than I've been here. And how they're going, and it's like, it's horrible. I'm glad for that kid in the stage of life. That's what we raise them for. But it's an awful thing, and so I get reflective, and I start to imagine some stuff, and I was counting up years, because people ask me this stuff at camp especially, and it seems like there's answers that I should have. It doesn't seem to be a very good idea for me to say, I don't know. And so this year for me was 21 years working at camp. It should be 23, but I had a couple years of work stuff. 21 years working at camp, and it's Becky and mine, our 9th year as the directors at camp. And it's like, I don't have all the answers. That's for sure. You know that I don't have all the answers. But I feel like I've been walking with these kids, enough of them, for long enough that I've seen enough kids get into trouble. I'm not talking about legal trouble. I mean, we've watched some of that. We've watched kids get into legal trouble. And that's bad, but I'm thinking more of spiritual trouble. And it seems like, you know, after talking with these kids for 21 years and hearing about their plans and what they're going to do, you start to see some patterns. And the kids start saying the same things as the other kids that we've watched fall off the spiritual cliff. And we see some of the same red flags of some of the other kids for the last 21 years who have fallen off the spiritual cliff. And so we watch these kids, they get into trouble and they fall away and they make some really big mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes have really bad consequences. And I don't know how to do this. There's a movie where somebody does this to somebody, but don't you just want to grab them by the face? Just grab our kids by the face and squeeze their cheeks and pull them in close and say, please, please. I'm not trying to load heavy burdens on your shoulder. I know it's hard to live this life. I know that sometimes it feels like an uphill battle and it's impossible, but you just want to grab them and squeeze them and say, please, this is for your good. We want nothing but the very best for you. Ultimately, the very best spiritually for you. And this is the wisdom of God, worth more than piles of cash and gold and silver. It is for your best interest to listen to what He said and to do everything in your power to live by it. Not because I'm a cantankerous old man trying to make your life miserable, but because I want the best for you. Please, I don't know how to... this is what I want to do with some of these kids. It feels like it's getting worse. I feel like I just want to get down on my knees and grab their pants and say, please, I'm begging you, please, don't walk down that road. There's nothing but a spiritual cliff down there. And it's not going to end well for you. I'll beg if I have to. And so here's the list of things. This was our conclusion for the week of camp. But this is really just, like, if we only have a week, so this is only just a temporary list. But we say, hey, not just to kids, but to all of us, pay attention to the things that influence you. That's a lot of this. Do you know there's billions, literally billions of dollars piped into this thing for people trying to influence me and get stuff into my head and into my heart? There's a whole industry of people trying to advertise. And so I say, please, pay attention to the things that influence you. Please, seek the truth and not your truth. That was our Tuesday class that we said. But I feel in my heart, who cares? This is what God has spoken, and He's the one who created the universe. Seek the truth, not your truth. On Wednesday, this is what we said. And boy, isn't this true. I think if you're going to say amen in a lesson, this would be a place where if you've learned this the hard way, you say amen. Build good habits now. That's what we say to our kids, because the things that you're doing right now that are ultimately going to grow into bad habits, it's going to be a nightmare to break those habits. And so you build good habits now. On Thursday, we talked about lessons specific to boys and girls, and you can imagine what some of those are. And this is the things that I said to the kids. I said, if I only get one chance to talk to you, devote your entire self to God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And ultimately, it's for your own benefit, for your good. And then we spent a night talking about the second thing that I would say to someone. The person that you marry is going to have a huge impact on your life. You can't make a mistake on that one. And so I talked to them about that. It's fun to talk to 9-year-olds about their future spouse. They're looking at me like, what? And then the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And you go through this list. Please. It's for your good. It's not just a bunch of lessons for kids. It's for all of us. Those 4 passages, God has given us His wisdom and His word for our good. If you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, the Christianity thing that we do is not a burden. It's an avenue to God through Jesus, forgiveness that we can have through Jesus, through faith in Him, where we can hand our lives over and say, all right, God, I'm yours now. And the great thing about that is it works out for me in the end. It's for my good. If we can help you with that tonight, come forward, make your needs known as we sing the invitation song.